It's time for Aaron Glenn to get to work.
Shah Khan released a statement that Trent Baalke is no longer the Jaguars general manager.
Notre Dame defensive coordinator Al Golden is on the move, so where will Notre Dame go to replace him?
SGA has his first ever 50-point game against the Utah Jazz.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Tell me if you've heard this before. The Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs are playing in the AFC playoffs and in the AFC Championship game.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Joe, this is a huge game, obviously. We joked about it beforehand. Really nothing going on in this game, right? I mean, not playing for anything.
Yeah, it's a big one, fellas, and nice to do this twice a year with you guys. It's part of life these days. So that's part of the deal. The Chiefs have obviously set the standard in the National Football League, not just the AFC. And 7 years in a row, they've been in this game 6 times. They've hosted it, and the Bills have their opportunity right now to knock off the Chiefs. And obviously, they've failed the previous 3 times in doing so. Go back to that 2020 AFC Championship game. The Bills had that early lead, but boy, did it go away very quickly. And felt like Kansas City was certainly ahead of the Bills at that time. They were well into their Patrick Mahomes era, and it just didn't feel like the Bills were ready. And then you get to the next one, and, well, that was 13 seconds. And I think that the real story there, from like you're wanting to get into the Bills side of this history, it's that the Bills had the capacity to win the game. It wasn't that they couldn't do it. It was very much circumstantial. Now it's their fault. They blew 13 seconds, but it wasn't a capacity issue. It wasn't that they couldn't beat Kansas City. And I'd say the same thing about what happened last year in Buffalo, where I thought the Bills, more than anything, let Kansas City off the hook, had certainly their opportunities to put them away. They had some drops and missed a field goal and weren't able to put them away and let them off the hook. And so here they are again. The Bills have certainly had the answers in the regular season. They've won the last 4, a couple of those by multiple scores, but it's empty. It doesn't mean anything. This is the one that matters, and this is the opportunity ahead of the Buffalo Bills.
And it's almost a comfort to have this matchup, because when we go to training camp every year, in the back of our mind, we have this Bills team. It's just the way that it's gone since 2020. And it's comforting to know that they both got here and things worked out, quote unquote, like they should. But the matchups are really, really interesting. And I think that the progression of both of these teams comes to a head. Some similarities this year that really stand out to me, with a lot of youth, a lot of change on the defensive side for both teams. The wide receiver groups have been turned over, so to speak. Obviously, with Shakir leading the Bills group, Xavier Worthy, for all intents and purposes, has been the one guy who's been there all season for the Chiefs, another rookie. I find that really intriguing, that these established veteran quarterbacks have to continue to try to manufacture something new and different. And I think that evolution is what brings it back and keeps it a close game. I expect another one. What stands out to you in terms of matchups with either the passing game or anything else that stands out to you?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, when you think about this game, I don't really find as much concern on the offensive side of the football for Buffalo, where I think they're going to have some good opportunities to score and move the ball. It really comes back to the defense. The defense has been the unit that's let Buffalo down in these matchups. And what's going to be different this time? That's the question I keep going back to. And they just hadn't been able to affect Patrick Mahomes at all. He hasn't registered a turnover-worthy throw in 3 playoff matches previously. He's got a 75% completion percentage. He's throwing for over 300 yards a game. He's got a passer rating of 125 in these postseason games, which are crazy different from the regular season. There's nothing pedestrian or human about Patrick Mahomes, but his regular season splits against Buffalo absolutely are. He's a regular quarterback, not in the postseason. And I guess that's probably the story of Patrick Mahomes really of late, where it's just the flip switches, and he's tough to beat and he's tough to put away. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. And so the Bills, from a matchup perspective, have got to figure out how to affect Patrick Mahomes. And in week 11, they certainly did. I thought they did a phenomenal job with their cage rush, incorporating a spy mirror type look. They did some dime stuff, but dime not necessarily in the traditional sense of 3 down lineman, 2 linebackers, 6 defensive back look. They broke that out and they've sprinkled it in a few times since. And so, those are the jabs, right? I think you can look at those as jabs, but it's all about counter punches. And obviously the Chiefs have had the counter punches in the postseason. I think the Bills have set those early jabs and maybe landed a few right hooks, win those the regular season game. But who has the answers in the postseason? So far, it's been Kansas City. And so I'm very interested in how the Bills can affect Patrick Mahomes in ways that they haven't been able to in the postseason before. Now, I think they're healthy on defense in ways that they haven't, which is probably going to be helpful, but it's all about who shows up on Sunday in Arrowhead.
You bring up your offense and you bring up the Bills, and looking at Josh Allen, looking at how he's played this season, he has played at an MVP level the entire year. He hasn't turned the ball over in a very long time, and that is part of what has made this Bills team, so dangerous. What have you seen that's been different from him this season, and more specifically later in the season and into the playoffs, that has really kind of fueled their run and kept them going in the right direction to get into this game?
Yeah, there's just not negative plays. That's what it comes down to. This is the best quarterback season since 1970 in terms of fewest percentage of plays that are interceptions or sacks. He takes care of the football. It's a different Josh Allen. He's playing with efficiency, and it's rooted in the overhaul that they've had to their offensive skill players, right? It's no longer, well, you got to feed the ball to Stephon Diggs 15 times, or you have to get Gabe Davis his touches because he's a legit number 2 receiver. That's not the case at all. In fact, if you were to look up and down this Bills receiving core and the receiving output this year, there's nothing that's going to stand out to you. It's a bunch of dudes that have caught between 20 and 50 passes, like 10 of them, right? And so he just tries to do the smart right thing with the football. And I think what's been exciting is watching Josh Allen this year and this Bills team is that every win doesn't look the same. There's some games where Josh goes out and he'll throw 4 or 5 touchdowns, get the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. And there's games like last week where he just needed to go out there and go 16-22, not turn over the ball, compress the game, get the heck out of there with a win. The scripts are very different. They've shown a lot of different ways that they can win, whether that's run heavy, pass heavy, big plays on defense. And so I think that's the mark of a great team. It's just a matter of, okay, well, now you're going up against Kansas City. And the thing about Kansas City is they just know how to win. There's no style points with Kansas City this year. Not at all. But they know how to score more points at the end of the game, especially in the postseason. And so what's the script look like? Is this a situation where both teams try to compress this game, or is someone going to go after it and go get it? And if they do, is that going to be the right idea? That's what Sean McDermott and Andy Reid got to figure out. But there's a lot of dynamics to this matchup that I think, while there's been a lot of familiarity, of course, this is a standalone opportunity that I think is going to present some unique challenges for both teams.
I think you're absolutely right. And the way that they go about it, I think being different, being multiple, both run games are a little bit more impressive this year. Honestly, if I was going to pick one guy to be nervous about, it's either return of Kincaid, who didn't play in the last matchup, or Cook. And I love the fact that both these quarterbacks now have a run game they can lean on a little bit and take some of that pressure off, but it does widen the margin of what the possibilities are. And I think that just breeds another game that's going to come down to the last possession, maybe the last play. Let's hope that it's not a kick. That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, no kicks. This is the deal. No, these kickers, stay out of it. Referees, stay out of it. Let's let these players, these quarterbacks, these teams that have earned the opportunity to be there, be the ones that decide this game. Hopefully when everyone's having their overreaction afterwards, that we're talking about things that aren't kickers and referees.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of the most fun evenings this year was me and my wife getting a chance to go out. The excitement, the energy, it's unforgettable. It's unmistakable. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
It's time for Aaron Glenn to get to work.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
Well, the New York Jets have their next head coach. It is Aaron Glenn, a guy who was a great player for the Jets. He played with the team between 1994 and 2001, then spent a couple years in the scouting department about a decade ago. And now he's coming back. He is the next Jets head coach. And Aaron Glenn needs to hit the ground running. Even though it's January, there is a lot of work to be done. And on today's show, we're going to talk about what I think are the top priorities for Aaron Glenn. Now, here's what I think the number one priority for Glenn is. And it's the same priority I would give for any coach. And through the coaching process, through the process of all the interviews, I've used a phrase over and over and what I want in the next head coach of the Jets. And that is a culture changer. Because right now, the culture of the New York Jets is not very good. And the culture of the New York Jets has not been very good for a long time. It was bad under Robert Saleh, but to be fair, it was bad before Robert Saleh was here. Just kind of picking up where I left off yesterday when I did a special bonus show on Glenn, I think the New York Jets are an organization where too frequently excuses are made. During the Patriots dynasty, well, how can we win? We're up against this historic dynasty. Well, the Patriots dynasty is gone now, and the Jets still aren't winning. The Jets are a team that I just get the feeling, and this may start at the top with the owner, they feel bad for themselves when bad things happen. And one of the things that excites me about Aaron Glenn is this year a lot of bad things happened to the Detroit Lions, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which was the unit Glenn ran. And you never really know how somebody's going to handle the jump up from coordinator to head coach. It's a different job. But when adversity struck that team, Aaron Glenn said, we're not going to feel sorry for ourselves. The next guy up needs to play well. That's just how it is. I think that a lot of Jets fans kind of roll their eyes when they hear talk about culture, because culture is a very nebulous word used in the context of building an NFL team. And I think part of the issue is that the Jets talk about culture a lot. Joe Douglas's introductory press conference back in 2019 said, we're going to build the best culture in sports. Culture is like one of those phrases the Jets have used through the years as an excuse to not win. They say, well, it's okay, we're not winning because we're building a culture. And in fairness, a lot of teams use that as an excuse. They'll say we're rebuilding, we're building a culture. Well, the most important part of building a culture is winning. And it's about holding people accountable. And the New York Jets, over the last several years, one of the problems with this team is that they don't address problems. They ignore problems. They always look for like one solution that's going to solve everything. And that was especially pronounced through this year. This past season in 2024, it felt like the Jets always felt like they were one magical move away from being a Super Bowl team. That's why they fired Robert Saleh. Everything was Robert Saleh's fault after week 5. Then the next week, everything was Mike Williams' fault. So Mike Williams was demoted after the Devontae Adams trade, and then was eventually sent along to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the trade deadline. And you look at the Jets last year, and you saw that one of the issues is that, Greg Zuerlein is a perfect example, because Greg Zuerlein was missing kicks all season long. Now, would it be fair to say Greg Zuerlein was the sole reason the Jets were bad last year? And if only they had a good kicker, they would have been a playoff team? Absolutely not. I've heard some people make that argument, but look at what the Jets did on the offensive side of the ball. Look what the Jets did on the defensive side of the ball. Look at the caliber of coaching the Jets had. I think it's ridiculous to say that the Jets were a good team if they had decent kicking. It's just not fair to say. But it is fair to say that Greg Zuerlein was a problem last year. The Greg Zuerlein missed a lot of makeable kicks, and those kicks were part of the reason the Jets lost a lot of close games. They weren't the only reason. Look, the Jets lost a lot of close games because their offense didn't play well, their defense didn't play well. When you lose close games, it never comes down to really one factor. But Greg Zuerlein was clearly a problem. But you didn't see any move with Greg Zuerlein until it was like they ran out of scapegoats. Because how can you get rid of the kicker if everything's Robert Saleh's fault? How can you get rid of the kicker if everything's Mike Williams' fault? And the Jets just go down the line and they act like there's one solution. Heading into the season, Nathaniel Hackett wasn't an issue because Aaron Rodgers was going to fix everything. And this stuff doesn't work. And one of my complaints through the years with the Jets has been that they ignore problems. They don't address problems. They just try and wish them away, or they think that they can work around problems instead of addressing them head on. And this is something Aaron Glenn, I hope, will change. It's tough to say how Glenn will attack this, because you're going into an organization where a lot of the dysfunction starts at the top with the ownership. I think most people would agree with that. But we just need the Jets to have a different outlook on things, because we've seen this over and over. I mean, one of my complaints with Robert Saleh was, there were reports in 2023 that once Aaron Rodgers went down, Saleh just kind of gave up on the season. back in 2019 with Adam Gase. Sam Darnold got mono the first couple of weeks. If you listen to Adam Gase, it was almost like he couldn't understand why anybody would expect him to need to try and win games. It just goes on and on with the Jets, where it's a team where excuse making is okay, where losing can be explained, where people not doing their job don't need to be replaced. These are things that need to change if the Jets want to get good. When you talk about reason the Jets are bad, it's complex. When you've missed the playoffs 14 straight years, there's not one single reason, and there's not one single person to blame for that. But I think what's clear is that culturally, there have been problems here where people have not been held to account. Accountability is a buzzword. I know that. It can mean different things to different people. But at the end of the day, I don't think you can say that poor performance or losing have been treated the right way in this organization. So this is one of the reasons I'm excited about Aaron Glenn, despite the caveats, despite understanding that there's a lot of work to be done, despite understanding that Aaron Glenn's going to have to grow into the job. I think with any first-time head coach, there will be growing pains. There will be learning moments. But what I like about Aaron Glenn is that he's a guy who goes out there and demands excellence from his players. And my hope is that that's what he'll start doing with the Jets, because the way the Jets turn this around is they need to stop making excuses. I think that there have been too many excuses made for this team through the years. And that's got to change. And when I say too many excuses, I'm not talking about you or me. I'm talking about internally. Bad performance is not punished. And I hope that that's what will change with Aaron Glenn. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed with this team, but I think that's at the top of the list.
Shad Khan released a statement that Trent Baalke is no longer the Jaguars general manager.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast.
Trent Baalke fired as Jaguars GM. I saw some stuff from some national people saying, what in the hell is going on with Jacksonville? Okay, well, welcome to the show. This is not, you mean this is the threshold where you finally ask that question? Don't get this twisted. For those who are around here, this is a day of reckoning. This is the day that they finally realize that, no, we got to scrape all of it out. Okay? So to somebody else that doesn't follow the team closely, and then the national guys, this is why we tell y'all all the time, you got to pay attention to local, man, because the national people are saying, I'm just looking at them like, this is what makes you wonder what's going on here. And that's the disconnect that people who don't follow this team closely enough have. So welcome to the party. I'm glad you're here. But on a day when you are flabbergasted about what is happening in Jacksonville, people in Jacksonville are like, hallelujah. And first of all, I'm going to say this, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. This is not a celebration that Trent Baalke lost his job. This is a celebration that our owner finally understands that though you might like Trent Baalke, what he has been doing is not, I repeat, is not anything you need to be paying attention to going forward. All right. Nobody's here to say, okay, somebody needs to come in here and figure out how to work with you and Trent and figure out what y'all doing wrong. The Jaguars are at a point where you go, thank you for your service, but we need to move in a totally different direction. And the direction we have to move in has to be with new people who are going to be in lockstep and work together. We ain't got time to have this baggage. And see, I always said, when you in one relationship and you move on to somebody else, don't be talking about what you used to do. Don't be hurt about what used to. That's gone. If you're gonna take a swing at something new, man, you got to be vulnerable and willing to realize that you might make a mistake again. But the more you talk about what used to be, that's baggage, whether it's good or bad. And that is why a clean break had to happen. So this is not a celebration of Trent. This is more or less a celebration that the owner now realizes. And he had to probably learn some hard lessons, because there's going to be some speculation that I'm going to give you here in just a second. These are some hard lessons, and we had to watch it on full display. And there are things that everybody knew that About a month ago, it was like, who's going to tell him? Who's going to tell him? And then when people asked him in the interview with Trent, they were basically trying to tell him, and he scoffed at it. Almost, in my opinion, like, what are you talking about? We're gonna fire 85 people. Y'all remember all that stuff. I ain't trying to bring it all back up and come down on the dude, but that's basically what happened. And then today he saw the light. Whether he saw it because of what you all said, whether he saw it because it was obvious to everyone else, whether he saw it because he hit rock bottom, and that rock bottom was people telling him, no, I ain't gonna do it. Not like that, right? And if that's not the case, you know, he didn't say that in the statement. The statement kind of said that they had been talking all throughout the week. And then, I don't know, see, this is the weird part. I'm going to read it, man. I'm going to go back to it just to make sure I don't say this wrong. It said something to the effect of, we've been talking about it, you know, all week. Just so I get this right, because I have to get this right, because I don't want to make it seem like here I'm coming down on the dude too bad. But it was just something in here that makes me think like, okay, this is what we've been talking about all week, but it's going to be effective immediately. Okay. If y'all figured it out and it came to the best thing, whatever we had to get to this point, that's where we are. The Jags are going to get a new GM, and Ethan Waugh is going to be the interim GM. Don't know if he's going to stay. Don't know if he's going to go or whatever. But it appears that the Jaguars had a problem, and now they've identified. Well, they identified some of it, and then instead of sitting here fragmenting it, trying to figure out what part of it's wrong, like they have been doing, now they've been forced to do a little bit of self-diagnosis, and that self-diagnosis, in my opinion, is what led us to where we are. Thank you, Trent, for doing the best job you could here in Jacksonville. No hard feelings. I wish you the absolute best, the same way I did to Doug Peterson, the same way I did the year before to some coaches that I personally knew. And it's always hard. It's always hard because you think about those folks, but this is never personal. And that's one of the things that I try to do on the show every day. And I know some people can't catch it all the time, but one theme I always have is I make sure the things that I say can be timestamped. I have been talking about having a quarterback coach combination and having a GM coach combination and having a chain of command where there's one voice for this organization. I have been talking about that for years. So that way everyone knows that this isn't personal, and everyone knows this isn't about me just trying to be right from my office up here on North Main Street. That's not the thing. It is always about you, the fan. So what I've always tried to do over the years is as we grow together and as we both learn more and more about this team, I try to be super transparent about how I feel so we can all be smarter together. I know it's not a monologue, it's a bit of a dialogue every day, but I want you to feel smarter when you leave. So that's why today it seems like almost a reckoning for the fans in the city, because we have kind of been on this journey together where we suffer, we grieve, we come on here and we talk about the team, but make no mistake about it, even argue back and forth on social media. But the one thing that is common is I know you and I all want the same thing, and that's for this city and this team to be looked at and viewed as winners, because we know that's who we are. And we think Shad really is, because he's won at everything. But it's just so hard to watch every single time when you know, and I can't be quiet about it, when you know something isn't right. They didn't have one voice. They did not seem like they were on one track. Listening to Doug almost say nothing sometimes on the podium means that he wanted to say something, but he probably knew it wasn't in his best interest to do it. We did not hear from Baalke much. Y'all remember this day? You remember the day Doug Marrone said him and Jalen were fine and they live in the same neighborhood? You remember I was in there and I asked him, you and Jalen are okay? Y'all ain't got no problems. He said no. Eventually, at some point, I don't know if it was that day or another day, Doug said, I wish the people that had those problems would come down here and talk to you. And that's how I feel today. I feel like there's a bit of that same division, but instead of Doug, who's like the cab driver from New York, that's just going to say whatever he wants to say, The other Doug Peterson held it in and just took it on the chin. But now we've gotten here. What does it mean moving forward? It means to me, I think this makes this job the attractive job that we all know it is and can be. It means that the owner, in my opinion, has been humbled a little bit. And I think it is right for somebody that really, really loves football and loves the grind and loves how this is supposed to go and loves building people and making them come together for a greater cause. And that is more than the staff. That is more than the 53 and more than all of them combined with the practice squad. It's about galvanizing that building all in to go in one direction. And when they do that, that what comes with that will permeate through the fan base, and it'll go back to these communities, and we'll all get back on the train again. And you know what? I think they can do it. I really do. I hope they can do it. But this is the beginning. They have cleaned that thing all the way down.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting, especially if you're like me and your team's not in it anymore. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. The NFC Championship features two dynamic rushing offenses facing off. The two quarterbacks, always a threat to run, but FanDuel likes one to run a lot more. Jaden Daniels has a total rushing over-under at 54.5, which is a lot more than Jalen Hurts, 29.5, though. Jalen Hurts, a lot of tush-push stuff. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Notre Dame defensive coordinator Al Golden is on the move, so where will Notre Dame go to replace him?
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Al Golden is leaving Notre Dame to become the defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. This has been rumored for days, but I'll admit, it still stings now that it's official. So what was your reaction to the news?
Ultimately, it's not surprising, but to me, it is interesting how the tenor around this conversation shifted. Really felt like for months, the whole narrative was there's no way Al Golden's going to leave. He's not interested. He's happy at Notre Dame. And everybody made such a big deal about the extension Notre Dame had given him before the season, pointing to the 4 years on that contract, how much he was getting paid. But obviously that didn't really mean much. Now, I understand that 3 years is a long time for a college coordinator, but I do think it's interesting how quickly that changed. Like, was there no buyout there? Has there been anything reported on that? Was there an NFL clause? Because everybody made a huge deal about that extension. It doesn't look like it mattered at all.
I think it mattered. I think it just really narrowed down the list of potential suitors for Al Golden. Like, it sounded like he didn't want to entertain any other college jobs. He was perfectly content. But I think that there is a special affinity for Cincinnati for Al and his family. I mean, he spent a few years there as the linebackers coach before he joined Notre Dame staff as the defensive coordinator. I think the family really enjoys the area. And I do think that there was always a pull for Al Golden to go back to the NFL. And something that John Bryce from Football Scoop mentioned that I never even considered is that maybe there's a desire for Al Golden to become a head coach in the NFL. He's already tried it at the college level. Didn't really work out, at least not at Miami, but I think that was not really his fault there because there was so much other stuff going on. But if that's true, if he does want to become an NFL head coach, I think he's probably capable of doing that. And his coaching style might be more suited for that league because he's so good at the X's and O's. And if that's what he wants to do, it makes sense to go to the Bengals, be a defensive coordinator there, try to turn things around, and then maybe that will set him up for an opportunity to get a head job at that level. I mean, he's only 55 years old, so I think that plays a factor in it all, but I really don't think there were many other jobs he would have taken to leave Notre Dame, but unfortunately, this is the one.
Yeah, I guess it is. And it's still risky, right, too, because I think Zach Taylor and co. really run the risk of being fired next year if they have another disappointing season. So it's interesting for that reason, too. But I definitely understand the pull back to it. I'm a little bit surprised from the Bengals' perspective that they went back to this tree after Golden worked for Lou Anarumu, and then they fired him. But that might be more of an indictment on how bad the players they have on the Bengals defense are than any coaching, but somebody just had to take the fall. But it is interesting for that reason, too.
Yeah, I do understand the sentiment, especially considering like Zach Taylor. You think that if the Bengals don't make the playoffs next year, are they going to clean house? But then you remember that this is the same organization who kept Marvin Lewis employed from 2003 through 2018. And you have to imagine the Bengals are going to be better next year with Al Golden and everyone they have on offense. But there is a world where they have another really disappointing season. You know, what happens if Burrow gets hurt again and they win like 4 games? Would that be enough to clean house? And then Al Golden is just sitting there after one season with the Bengals. Obviously, I don't want that for him, but I think it's a real possibility and something that I'm sure he at least considered before he accepted this job.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we'll see what happens, but it's just, there's definitely some risk associated with it.
I also don't really understand the people who think that like he had one foot out the door before the national championship. Like the Bengals fired their defensive coordinator on January 6th. And I'm sure that the first contact that they had with Al Golden was not this past week. I think what happened there was his agent had been working behind the scenes. Al probably expressed interest to his agent saying, hey, yeah, I'm interested in that job. And then the agent works with the organization and then gets to this point where he does the interview now that the season ends. But I don't know. Did you put any stock into that? Do you think that his interest in this Bengals job had anything to do with the fact that the defense did not play their best against Ohio State?
No, and I frankly think that's a very immature reaction for anybody that has one. And people had the same reaction with Clark Lee before the ACC championship game and the Alabama game in 2022. And it's just unfair. It ignores the fact that these defenses were going up against superior talent. And yes, they didn't play their best, but I just think that's silly. And a lot of the mistakes they made were due to poor technique, not coaching. So I just like, it's an immature reaction, if you ask me.
I think it's fair to be disappointed that Notre Dame's last game with Al Golden as defensive coordinator went so poorly. That was probably the worst game that any Notre Dame defense has played in his 3 years at the job. But also, yeah, they were going up against one of the best offenses that we've ever seen. And they have Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. And sometimes you just lose those battles. But now that Al Golden is officially out the door, it seems like Mike Mickens, Notre Dame's current defensive backs coach, is the most logical option to replace Golden. I really can't think of anyone else. And I really don't want to lose Al Golden and Mike Mickens in the same offseason. And I feel like if Notre Dame does not promote Mickens, that is certainly going to be a possibility because there are going to be other teams around college football who are looking for a defensive coordinator and might see Mike Mickens as the perfect fit. So do you think it's going to be Mike Mickens? Is that all said and done? Or do you think that there's another candidate that I just haven't mentioned or even thought of?
I think it will likely be Mike Mickens, although I would not be surprised if Notre Dame took a swing at a former Notre Dame defensive coordinator. Just throwing that out there into the ether. John
Tenuta?
Yeah, exactly. You hit it. I was thinking him or Corwin Brown, but I don't know if Corwin Brown ever coached again after he got arrested. So probably not him.
Well, unfortunately, Bob Diaco just accepted a job with Bill Belichick and the UNC Tar Heels. I don't think he's defensive coordinator, though. I think he's going to be the linebackers coach, correct?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, how great would that be to bring big game Bobby D back into the fold? But we're obviously joking here. I think we all kind of expect Mike Mickens to get that job. Do you even think they will conduct like a national search, or do you think it's just like Mike Mickens gets the promotion? Because Marcus Freeman has also been very public about the fact that he thinks Mike Mickens has been ready to become a defensive coordinator for some time now.
I think that they have to, because it's not doing due diligence if you don't do that. I think it's also a bit of a unique circumstance. I'm not really sure who the rising young defensive coordinators are. Like there have been in years past, it feels like if you look at the sport right now, I feel like the guys doing it the best are veterans like Golden or Jim Knowles at Ohio State. And it's also interesting because Oklahoma is still looking to hire a defensive coordinator. I think there's also some speculation that Wink Martindale at Michigan might go back to the NFL too. So you could have some big time jobs opening up, because one of the things that has been rumored is that Jim Knowles is going to take that Oklahoma DC job. So then Ohio State opens up in that case. So there's just a lot of interesting factors at play here. And I'm not really sure who all the candidates are.
You're right. Tom Allen was pretty highly sought after. Now he's with Clemson after his season with Penn State. So it would be, a different move, but this is also something that Notre Dame just done before, right? And I saw some people who expressed their concern with hiring Mike Mickens to be the defensive coordinator, considering he has no coordinator experience. And I understand it, especially when we're going from a guy like Al Golden, who's been around for a really long time and had head coaching experience. But the difference now is Marcus Freeman is going to be entering his 4th year as the head coach as opposed to his first year. So I think he needed that help and he needed that experience a little bit more then than he does now. And also, when Clark Lee was hired to be Notre Dame's defensive coordinator, he had only been with the program 1 year as the linebackers coach, and he had no prior coordinator experience either. And then he ended up just being an elite defensive coordinator and then got a job in the SEC as the head coach. So I think Mike Mickens is actually more prepared to take that job now than Clark Lee was back then. So I have confidence that if Notre Dame does end up promoting Mike Mickens, it's going to work out the best for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that Mickens obviously has a bit more of an established track record just with developing and turning out corners going back to even Cincinnati. So I think that's fair, but there's always risk associated with somebody who's never been a coordinator before. But I think it's a risk that Notre Dame is and should be willing to take.
Is there anything else that concerns you about Mickens taking the job other than inexperience? Because I think, some people might be concerned that, well, if he's the defensive coordinator, maybe he won't be able to spend as much time with the secondary, but he could still be the quarterbacks coach and the defensive coordinator. Most coordinators also coach a position, like Mike Denbrock coaches the tight ends. And then now that Al Golden is gone, that frees up one more spot on the staff. So now they could hire a full-time safeties coach to kind of give Mickens some support, because once Chris O'Leary left, they did not have a full-time safeties coach. So he could still get some help in the secondary and handle all the big picture stuff that is required of a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that does give me concern. I know Nick Saban obviously coached defensive backs, but just off the top of my head, and I don't know, it feels like often when I think of a defensive coordinator, I think of somebody associated with the linebackers, but maybe that's the wrong assumption. So that's a little bit just unique, at least as far as Notre Dame's been concerned, even right their last 3-4 defensive coordinators. So that's a little bit different, but outside of that, nothing really I can think of.
All right. Any more thoughts on the Al Golden, Mike Mickens situation before we move on to the national championship?
No, it'll just be interesting to see if there are any more staff defections as we go through this offseason. The odds are there probably will be, but I have no idea who. So that's something we just wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when you have a really good team and you have a great coaching staff.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of the most fun evenings this year was me and my wife getting a chance to go out. The excitement, the energy, it's unforgettable. It's unmistakable. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
SGA has his first ever 50-point game against the Utah Jazz.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Man, what a game this was. I mean, you enter this game, not a ton of juice. Like, there's question marks of if J-Dub was going to play. He did. We'll get to him coming up. It's the Jazz. The spread at our good friends over at FanDuel, 17.5. I mean, the best part about entering today, was that David Locke was in town. But besides that, it was like, just get me to Thursday. Just get me to the Mavs game. Something exciting. And then all of a sudden, the Jazz come out frisky. The Jazz get a lead. And you're thinking, okay, just get through this game now. Like, just go take care of the Jazz come hell or high water. And then Shea goes for 54 points, 5 assists, 8 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 blocks, 17 for 18 from the free throw line, 3 for 10 from the 3-point line, and 17 for 35, 48%. He almost made half of his shots in a 54-point game in this one. His first ever 50-point game on the heels of tomorrow, like before the Mavs game, he'll be announced as an all-star starter for the second time in his career. Alex Caruso lobbed that he's one of the greatest scorers of all time. I tend to agree. But how do you take in Shea's first ever 50-point night?
Yeah, I'm with you. Like the atmosphere coming in, it was like, oh, Wednesday night against the Jazz, like last place in the West. Like you said, didn't have much juice. What a cool like night for everybody in attendance tonight that decided to come out in the cold in Oklahoma City to watch this game. Hey, and to the credit of the Jazz, they actually played their guys tonight. Like John Collins had missed 8 games in a row. Colin Sexton had missed 2 out of the last 3, and then Lauri Markkanen had missed 4 in a row. So they put up a fight. And so I'm starting with that because they get the assist because they actually played the Thunder close enough tonight to where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander actually had to play a fourth quarter. Look what happens, Rylan. When Shai gets to play a full game, he goes for 50 points. Now, I thought that Shai, it's funny because in the post game, Mark Daigneault first said that he didn't even really think it was, Shai's best game of the season. Then Shai comes out later and says, I honestly didn't really think it was my best game I've had of the season. And I tend to agree with both of those guys. Shai, obviously incredible tonight. The 50-point game was long overdue. Several times this season, he could have had the chance to go for 50, but he didn't get to play a full game. And he's just not the kind of player that's going to gun for his own points and for his own achievements. But it came organically. And best of all, it came in a game that was close. And they actually needed all those 54 points to win tonight. And he went on a little run in the fourth quarter that the Thunder actually needed to win this game. So not only does he go for 54, but he doesn't within the game, and he did it to win the game. So great night from Shai. And it was cool to see on this random Wednesday against the Utah Jazz, a tanking team, you got to see, Shai's career high in points tonight.
Shai's career high in points, it previously was, 45, 46 once he hit that bucket tonight. Then he got to 54. First and foremost, the craziest thing that I have taken away from this is like before studying the box score, I said on my Locked On NBA recap, because we send in these 60-second clips to recap on game nights from somebody who was, there covering the game. And I said, it wasn't the most efficient night from Shai. And he still got to 54 points. He still hit the shots down the stretch, and it could have been even better because its efficiency was not from shot chucking, was not from bad shots. It was from the fact that Shai got to his spots at will, which necessitated the 35 shots, but some of them that he makes in his sleep did not fall tonight. But then you go study the box score. He made 48% of his shots. And we're sitting here saying, that's not the most efficient Shai's been. Oh, that's not Shai's efficiency standard. Think about how crazy that is. That 48% on 35 shots on a 54-point night is like, okay, that's kind of just what he does because he's right. How many times are those 10 games that Shai has not logged a single fourth quarter minute? As Caruso points out, a quarter of their games this season, SGA has been on the bench for 12 minutes in the fourth quarter. Think of how many times that's happened where Shai enters the fourth in that setting with 40. And a 10-point quarter for him is routine. I mean, that's just what he does, no matter the circumstances. So he could have had 50 earlier on. Like you said, the games have not been competitive enough to. Credit to Utah for making the score competitive enough to where you had to play Shai. And it even got dicey down the fourth quarter before he came in. It was a 1-point game. But I just think it's unreal that like his standard is a 48% night is viewed as that's not efficient Shai. It's pretty damn efficient. That's pretty good. I believe Alex Caruso, man, he's an all-time scorer. You can dance around it. You can try to tap dance and walk on eggshells and not want to sound like a homer. He's an all-time great, and he's going to bear out to be an all-time great. And he's the closest thing. Like when you close your eyes, and this is going to hit the ear extremely funny, and I am ready for you to lob tomatoes and boo me off the pod. He's one of the closest things to Michael Jordan this game's ever seen. Like whenever my dad tells me these stories about Michael Jordan, when I go watch these documentaries about Michael Jordan, when I go watch the highlights about Michael Jordan, that's the stuff Shai's doing. Like it's improbable. He's not one of these guys who's doing it by these step back threes and hitting 6 threes, and that kind of boosts you right there. Now you just got to go do the rest. He's doing it all inside the arc. He's doing it by just meticulously getting to his spots, breaking down defenders, and fancy footwork and brute strength. I mean, how many times did you see him shoulder check Walker Kessler 5 feet away from his planted spot? Like Walker Kessler, he's 7 feet tall, 450. And 7 feet tall, 240. And Shea is bulldozing him over. It's like it doesn't even matter. That's how strong this guy is in a guard body. This stuff doesn't happen every day. It's happened every day for us because we watch the Thunder every single day. It's not something to be taken lightly. I completely agree with Alex Caruso that no matter how you slice it, he's an all-time great scorer.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is, I watched Michael Jordan. I actually became a basketball fan because largely in part to Michael Jordan. First of all, Shea has spoiled us. When we talk about it wasn't his best, game of the season, 48%. Like, that's how great he's been, how efficient he's been, that you can take a night like tonight, yeah, he could have been better though. Like he said so, Mark said so, and we think so. That's how good he's been. But the MJ comparison, it's because he's got that throwback old school, like he scores at the rim, he scores in the mid-range, he's got this really deep bag, and he's also a throwback two-way player. And Caruso mentioned it tonight. I love that he just kind of casually brought up, out of nowhere, Shea's one of the best scorers we've ever seen. And Caruso is like a student of the game. He said tonight, I watch a lot of basketball. This dude is like a basketball junkie. And so he knows what he's talking about. And I agree. When you look at modern players, that whole MJ Kobe, and not saying that, he's going to win 5 or 6 titles like MJ Kobe and all this, but when you look at the game, you look at the efficiency, you look at the way he gets his points, you look at the two-way ability, you even look at the body type and some of the style and the way he gets to his spots, and just the dominance and how elite he is for a guard. And then you look at the numbers, the 30-point seasons. This is going to be Shea's third 30-point season in a row. That is MJ territory. And then you look at the steals and blocks combined with the scoring, combined with the efficiency. I mean, that's MJ stuff. And you don't usually see that kind of efficiency and defense all around game on high volume scoring from a guard, but we're seeing it from Shea.
You just don't. And Caruso, not just a student of history, but widely respected coast to coast as one of the best defenders in this league, who's had to defend every top active scorer in the NBA, including Shea. And he's one of these guys that just from being around him, he's media trained in the sense of he's very pointed with his words. He's not just going to throw stuff around, but he's also willing to let you in to hey, this is what I think. It's not just the same 0-0 stuff that you might hear. He's genuine up there. And so for him to sit there and genuinely say that Shea's an all-time scorer as a guy who's defended all-time scorers, I think is a big deal. I think you got to listen to the peers on that one. And like you mentioned with the defense, I know we're going to talk about the scoring a ton, and we'll talk about it again in the next segment. But another element of that Kobe influence, that MJ influence, and Shea talks specifically about Kobe a lot, is just the competitiveness and the motor. Shea is of the NBA as we know it, the modern NBA. He's earned the right to be a guy that doesn't try defensively in January, that doesn't give max effort in January. You see it all the time. In fact, there's way more stars who play that way than there are stars that don't. And Shea doesn't do that. Shea plays on both ends, 100 miles an hour. Every single minute he's on the court, he's breaking up lobs at the rim. He's getting blocks. He's getting steals. And I just continue to harp on this. I think it's so true. If Shea was on a different team that didn't have all these defenders that you're gawking at, Shea would be the best defender. He's not the best defender because you've got Caruso, you've got Kaysen, you've got Lou, you've got J-Dub, you've got Chet, you've got Hartenstein. So he's not the best defender on this team. But man, he would be the best defender on a ton of teams, and he's the very best two-way star in this league. Only rival to him is Giannis. I mean, for a two-way stardom that do it on both ends and do it efficiently and do it every night and play their pace, their way at will, no matter who's in front of them.
you can talk about the Jazz being a lowly team, and I totally agree. They're one of the worst teams in basketball. But tonight they played all their guys, and tonight they had a formula that should have been troublesome. Not that any team can stop Shea, but Lauri Markkanen, with all his size and length, is blown by and is going to get mixed around on the dribbles. Of course, that happened tonight. But getting past him, what Shea did routinely, then you have Walker Kessler at the rim, where you do most of your damage at the rim. It's like you constantly had to battle through the trees in this game to play the way Shea likes to play. He took those battles on, he chopped the trees, and he ends up with a 50-point night, which gives you that freedom. Again, I agree with Mark and Shea. He's not some different player now that he's scored 50. He's not some different scorer now that he's scored 50. You're just now have the freedom to say it. You have the right of expression of, now that you've crossed this off your list, everybody can agree. He's went and got 50. He's went and averaged 30. He's been an all-star starter now twice, at 6:30 tonight. He'll be an all-star starter twice. So we all know that's coming. Like, he's done it. He's checked it off the list. He's in the driver's seat right now for the scoring title. He's just an all-time great. And there's no real reservations needed on SGA because we've seen it consistently. His whole life's consistent, as he famously said, throughout this stretch.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting, especially if you're like me and your team's not in it anymore. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. The NFC Championship features two dynamic rushing offenses facing off. The two quarterbacks, always a threat to run, but FanDuel likes one to run a lot more. Jaden Daniels has a total rushing over-under at 54.5, which is a lot more than Jalen Hurts, 29.5, though. Jalen Hurts, a lot of tush-push stuff. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That was horrible. That was a complete self-destruction. That was a game that Ole Miss controlled for 39 minutes and 30 seconds. But the last 2 minutes of the game, Buzz Peterson completely outcoached Chris Beard. Ole Miss all of a sudden got a case of the Butterfingers, the turnovers, and Texas A&M was able to win the game 63-62. It was crap. It was not necessarily acceptable. It's not something that a good team does. This was not the team that went to Coleman Coliseum and beat Alabama. This was a team that was not sure of itself. This was a team that allowed the physicality of Texas A&M to take control at the end of the game. Texas A&M was losing the game. They looked like the more comfortable team. Ole Miss looked uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to step up to be the alpha dog, and Texas A&M was able to hit a buzzer beater at the end and win the game 63-62. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and this is the instant overreaction. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you my thoughts on the game real quick for a couple of minutes. We're going to go over the box score a little bit, and then we're going to take your comments. Be sure if you comment on the podcast, put where you're commenting from and your name so I can call you out and recognize what is going on. Ole Miss absolutely controlled that game. They did. They controlled that game for 39 minutes and 30 seconds. Ole Miss had a complete control of that game. That game changed when Buzz Peterson decided to, hey, let's let Devin Barnes get open and foul him. He's a 68% free throw shooter. He missed the front end of the one-on-one that allowed a situation to where a three-point shot could win the game. A&M, to their credit, took the three-point shot, nothing but net, and wins the game. Ole Miss took it down the court, and there was a weird scrum for the ball and all that, and Ole Miss just wasn't able to carry it over. This was not the basketball team that beat Alabama. This was not that confident group at the end of the game whenever it got weird handling what was going on. This was not that team. This looked like a team that was unsure of themselves, unsure how to deal with the trap. I'm sure they worked against it. I'm sure Chris Beard taught all of that stuff. There was weirdness in their indecisiveness at the end. Nobody wanted to be the alpha dog at the end of the game to win the game. It looked like for a little bit it was going to be Sean Padula, who looked very good from the outside. Juju Murray looked very good from the outside. But nobody stood up to take control in this basketball game. And Texas A&M was able to whittle an 8-point lead down to Texas A&M winning the game 63-62. I don't think A&M led until the last shot went in. That was the first time that Texas A&M led this game. And it's kind of a gut punch a little bit, because what this game does is make the Missouri game mean that much more. It makes that Missouri game be very important, because Ole Miss is in a race to 8. After the Alabama game, we thought it was a race to 10, but we're going to go back to a race to 8 after losing 2 in a row. They have a road game to prevent a 3-game losing streak to the Missouri Tigers this weekend. If Ole Miss can get that win and get right, that's 1-on-1 on the week, we're fine. Everything's good with Texas coming into town and Auburn coming into town. This is a difficult stretch, like all stretches are in SEC basketball. What is discouraging is a very senior-laden and kind of grown-up team freaked out at the end of that game. The pressure got to them. There were some athletes from Texas A&M. Yeah, they have athletes. No joke. But Ole Miss freaked out at the end of that game. Very un-Ole Miss-like to freak out in that situation. This is a team that doesn't turn the ball over, and it just got sloppy in the last 2 minutes of that game. A lot of that has to do with the rock fight that Texas A&M created. Props on them. It was a perfect storm, keeping the game in the 60s. This is where both teams wanted to live, and they made it happen. Ole Miss forced 20 turnovers from Texas A&M. It was a mess. And if anybody else is out there and looking at it, Ole Miss needs to bounce back. This was a hard loss. This was a gut punch. This was a legitimate gut punch. Ole Miss should be 5-1 going into the Missouri Tigers game. Instead, they are 4-2 with a chance to go 4-3 after a 4-1 start, or 4-0 start, essentially. You had the overtime game against Mississippi State to where you missed a buzzer beater to win or to tie. You had this situation to where you missed a shot that could have won the game at the very end. Now you have the Missouri Tigers coming up before you get the Auburn Tigers and all of them. So when Ole Miss plays its best, they can beat dang near anybody in the country. When Ole Miss plays like this, I'm concerned that they're going to be able to get a win against South Carolina. This was a team that was not sure of themselves. This was a team whose confidence was shaken and didn't think they were going to score. All right, so this game was interesting. So we're going to talk about the results of it. Texas A&M 63-62 winner in the game. Neither team shot particularly well. Wade Taylor for Texas A&M, their best player, had a rough night as well. Ole Miss shot 36.9%. A&M 38.7%. Ole Miss was 13-35. They shot way too many three-point shots in this game. Texas A&M shot 8 of 28. When people complain about basketball, that's what they're talking about. They're just jacking up threes. Turnovers, Ole Miss had 13, many of them in the last 2 minutes. A&M had 20. Ole Miss had 31 rebounds, A&M 48. That was the difference in this ball game. Ole Miss, whenever they lose the rebound battle this much, it is hard for them to win a game, and both teams had 11 fouls. A&M was led by Zurich Phelps, who had 14 points. Farrell Payne had 10. Manny Abaseki had 12. Ole Miss was led by Sean Padula, who had 16 points. Malik Dia had 12. Jamin Brakefield had 10. Jalen Murray had 12 for a total of 62 points. Ole Miss shot 75% from the foul line. The one they missed was the one they most needed to make. A&M shot 77.8%, 7 and 9 from the line. The officials in this game were at the very least weird. If you look at the number, the game was way too physical to have that few of free throws shot in this game. It just was. The refs let a physical game happen. They tried to get it under wraps later on in the game. It was a little bit too late. But this game had turned into a rock fight and stuff like that as well. So we'll see exactly how that goes. This was a game that Ole Miss gave away. This was a game that Ole Miss could have won. This is a game that Ole Miss should have won. This is a game that Ole Miss did not win. And as good as it's going to look at the end of the season to have that Alabama win on your resume, it's going to probably look just as poor thinking about how you could have and should have won this football game against Texas A&M, or basketball game against Texas A&M. It was a mess. It was no other way to put it. It was a mess. It was a disaster thing. Buzz Peterson, like I said, coached Chris Beard under the table, essentially. It was a situation where he completely controlled the last 2 minutes of the game. He determined what was going to happen. He determined fouls and the way the defense was going to be set up. He made Ole Miss speed up and become really uncomfortable. Ole Miss, the senior-laden, grown-up team, looked very uncomfortable, and Texas A&M looked more comfortable down 8 points with 2 minutes left to go. There was no alpha dog for Ole Miss to look at what could happen. So we'll see exactly how that goes moving forward, and we'll see what they do.